Alright everyone, so I just finished the Miraculous Ladybug movie. Formerly the Awakening movie, but I think they just sort of scrapped that name because I haven't heard it talked about, and they just advertised it as the Miraculous Ladybug movie, so I don't think that's the name anymore. And if you somehow did not know, this movie just released today on Netflix, so definitely go give it a watch if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, I'm just going to spend this video talking about my thoughts on it. Now here's the thing, guys. This movie was really bad. Like, it was not anything like the show. They hardly showed any of the powers. Plagg was just terrible. I hated Plagg. I didn't like, basically anytime he was on screen, I did not like it. And just overall, it leaned into the power of love too much. So yeah, overall, I would give this movie like a 2 out of 10. Now that, I think, was my expectations for this movie. Going into the movie, since I was, a longtime fan of the show, I was like, this movie is taking away from the resources from the show. Why are they, taking all the money from the show and putting it into the movie, which is, extremely high quality. It's a cinema film, right? And then taking away resources from the show itself and sort of letting it rot and die. So going into it, and when I was covering it, I was like, yeah, this looks really cool, but I was very critical of it, from the get-go. And I was like, I just want to see the actual show itself, prosper and thrive. But in reality, I really liked the movie, which is really crazy. I did not think I would like it this much. There are still some parts that, I didn't really care for. Like everything that I said about Plagg was true. I hated Plagg. I hated everything about it. And I didn't like how mean Adrian was in the beginning. Like, yes, I guess that sort of makes sense given his character background, but I just still didn't like it. I liked how he was in the show better. And to be honest, it sort of seemed like Plagg had an influence on him there, which I guess makes sense given Plagg, but still, I hate Plagg in this movie. Like, terrible. I don't know what they were thinking. Plagg was one of my favorite characters in the show, and now he's my least favorite character from this movie. I also did think, at the end there, they were leaning a little bit into, like, the power of love a little bit too much. Like, they were putting too much emphasis on it. Just let the viewers assume that. Don't say it, because when you say it, it sounds cringy. But I guess, it is a kid's movie, so I guess it's sort of standard in, a kid's movie. But, for me, as an adult, I'm like, okay, yes, we can assume that, but when you say it, it's a little cringy. But overall, as far as the plot goes in itself, like with the battles and with, the ending, with how Hawkmoth, figured everything out and was defeated, I felt like this is how the show should have been. Like, the show's pacing was so bad. And this movie, yes, it was a little rushed, but it's a movie. That's sort of what you expect. And if you don't want a two-parter movie, it's going to be a little rushed. And when I say rushed, I mean just for the viewers who haven't seen the show. If you've seen the show, this movie was probably perfectly paced for you because you're not missing any of the context that you gain from the show. Like, yes, it was different, but also it had enough elements from the show that you could take some things from that knowledge and apply it to the show. So like the Cataclysm, right? They only showed that once and they didn't explain it in the beginning. Kind of confusing if you've never seen this and this is the first miraculous thing that you're seeing, but for us experienced viewers, we understood the miraculous powers and the Cataclysm. Sure, Ladybug's power was completely different, but I actually liked how it was in this movie better. Although I do wish she used it a little bit more and it was actually explained, but I did like the thought behind it because I felt like she had multiple powers in the show, where in this one it's just she can create things. It sort of matches better with Cat Noir. It makes sense. If Cat Noir can only break things, Ladybug should only be able to create things, which, I guess that ultimately gives you more power, but I just felt like the way it was executed, like it didn't rely on a lucky charm. It was just she could create things. It felt more thought out to me, even though it was more simple than the show. And more than just that, because they felt so even, it leaned more into them having to work together. Whereas in the show, it really felt like it was Ladybug dragging Cat Noir along. But in this movie, it seemed like they had to work together to survive. And I mean, we saw that in the final battle when, Hawkmoth, which by the way, Hawkmoth was a great villain. He was not stupid this time, which is so refreshing to see, because we're so used to Hawkmoth just having these stupid plans. He was actually really powerful in the ending. So much so that Ladybug and Cat Noir didn't stand a chance. And sort of going back to what I was, talking about before I got into my Hawkmoth rant, at the final battle, Ladybug and Cat Noir weren't working together. And this ultimately led to them being absolutely demolished, which showed how much of a partnership they had versus in the show. Like I said, it really felt like Ladybug was just dragging Cat Noir along. So I really felt like they did Cat Noir justice in this movie, which is also really refreshing to see. And Hawkmoth just overall was just written really well, I felt like. He started off, I guess, a little hesitant and he couldn't control the powers, which was good. Like, we saw him, like, he passed out the first time he used it because he couldn't control it, which was great. Great character development. He just didn't, he didn't master it at first, like we saw in the show. But also, being Hawkmoth took a physical toll on him. Like, we saw him so disheveled, in character as far as being Gabriel Agreste, which was also really nice to see. He wasn't this perfect image and perfect at hiding it. He clearly was taking a toll mentally and physically. And in his song, like his coming of being evil song, like he fully acknowledged that he was being evil, which in the show, he was like, oh, I'm not evil. I'm just doing this for the greater good, blah, blah, blah. But in this show, he acknowledged like, yes, I'm evil and I'm doing these evil things. And I don't care as long as it brings back Emily, which was really good because, he was being evil. He was actually trying and being a good villain. And then that meant that his redemption just felt so much more powerful because we saw how much of a toll it was taking on him. And then he was like, you know what? I was just acting crazy. I don't know what came over me. That feels way more realistic when he just gives up and is like, I don't care. I'm willing to do anything. I'm desperate, right? Whereas, in the show, Gabriel was like half acknowledging it, half, pretending like, oh, I'm doing this for the greater good, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, it didn't feel genuine in the end of season 5 when he was just like, yeah, okay, I'll sacrifice myself, for Adrian. It felt less convincing. So between Hawkmoth actually being powerful and, how he came to realize like, yeah, this isn't who I want to be, I need to be here for Adrian, that was just really good. He played the villain really nicely. And he was defeated, and that means, I guess, no more Hawkmoth in this universe because, Master Fu got the Miraculous back, which was great to see. That being said, it did really feel like they were setting up a second movie, and I do believe I heard somewhere that they are working on a second movie, and I was like, why are they making a second movie? But, they set it up pretty nicely here. And that's very clearly going to be, Natalie taking the Peacock Miraculous and, being the main villain of the next movie. Which will be interesting. I don't know why Natalie needs to become the villain or, what she plans to do, but, I guess it'll be interesting to see. Now, another thing that I didn't really care for in this movie was, I guess, the progression of the relationships between Marinette and Adrian and Ladybug and Cat Noir. Like, it felt rushed. It was a movie, so we didn't get to see as much character development as far as, seeing Marinette and Adrian sort of get closer. Like, it just sort of felt like it happened all at once. Like, they were really close. Whereas in the show, it was a very, very slow progression. Too slow of a progression. But at least we got all of the minor nuances and we saw every single detail, even if we didn't need every single detail. But like I said, as a viewer of the show and the movie, given the lower amount of context in the movie, I felt like I could apply my knowledge from the show into the movie and make it make more sense. Now, another thing that I felt like just was really good about this movie was the reveal. We had the reveal teased to us so much in the show. It was so drawn out. And then even in the season 5 finale where we thought it was all going to happen, it didn't end up happening. Like, in this kind of show, it sort of just makes sense. And especially in the movie, it makes even more sense because, they defeated all the villains. They don't need the Miraculous anymore, I guess until the second movie. But, like, they're done. They don't need to be superheroes anymore. Supposedly, we don't know what's going on in their universe, but, theoretically, until Natalie shows up with the Peacock Miraculous, they don't really, need to be villains or superheroes, I mean. And so because Cat Noir was sort of, having that gap of, not being able to see Ladybug anymore, having the reveal sort of made it come all together for him. And because in the movie they didn't exactly show the progression of the relationship between Marinette and Adrian, we were sort of missing out on some context. But as someone who saw the show, I could pick up on the fact of, them getting closer was really meaningful to Adrian. And to elaborate on what I mean by this, remember when the reveal happened and Adrian started crying, one of the reasons why he was crying specifically was because he was at that turning point of where, he was sort of having conflicting feelings between Ladybug and Marinette. And he was like, it's just not really realistic because, I don't ever really need to be Cat Noir anymore, but I still like Ladybug, but I'm starting to like Marinette. And so he's like, I have to choose between the two, and I don't really want to do that. But then when the reveal happened, he was like, oh, now I see. And, they're the same person and I don't have to choose. This is the best possible outcome. But since we didn't see Marinette and Adrian physically getting closer, I mean, we saw a few, cut shots and B-roll, but we didn't actually see them, too much, and it wasn't really explained, and we just didn't see enough. But as someone who saw the show, I can understand that nuance. So yeah, some things were missing from this movie where, if I was just, someone who hadn't seen the show at all, I'd be like, okay, that sort of makes sense. But, I feel like it wasn't explained a whole lot. So I definitely do feel like watching the show will give you more insight going into the movie. But overall, story-wise, with the plot and with Ladybug, Cat Noir, and Hawkmoth specifically, this show or this movie really knocked it out of the park. The dynamic between Ladybug and Cat Noir, at least towards the middle, was really good because they were working together as a team and not just, Ladybug is the commander of everyone. And they were defeating villains, and then they came to face Hawkmoth, who was actually really powerful. And unlike, in the show, which I guess, we sort of saw some B-roll of, Ladybug and Cat Noir fighting some people, but in Hawkmoth's sort of intro musical scene, it sort of looked like he was creating a team of supervillains, which is really what he should have done from the start and not just akumatizing any random person on the street. Like, he went to a prison and got, people who were in jail. And that's a smart move. He didn't, it was just smart on Hawkmoth, and I don't know how to describe it. It's just so weird, putting the words smart and Hawkmoth together. And then the ending where, Ladybug and Cat Noir lost, but, Hawkmoth came to his senses and was like, you know what? I've got this all wrong. I need to learn to let go. Overall, that was way better than the ending of season 5. So yes, overall, plot-wise, I think this is honestly what Miraculous should have been. Obviously I would have made some differences and, combined some things from the movie and some things from the show, but really, this movie is ultimately what it should have been. It reminded me a lot more of the PV, because Hawkmoth seemed a lot more powerful in the PV. It sort of gave us Doomsday kind of vibes, the final battle did. And just overall, some of the villains reminded me more of the PV, with creating an army almost. So overall, I feel like this is just what it should have been from the start, or at least more like this. If I had to choose between, the movie or the show as far as plot goes, I'd 100% go with the movie. After the train wreck of the season 5 ending and just sort of the ending of the main show, seeing this is here's an alternative ending for you in case, you wanted it Zag's way. It's thank you, Jeremy Zag. I wasn't expecting this, but I appreciate it. Also, as a fun bonus, Volkswagen very obviously sponsored this movie or paid to have their car, be in the movie. So it was just funny seeing, the Volkswagen emphasized on every single time a car was shown. So it was funny being oh, there's a Volkswagen. That's funny. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. It was almost a 2-hour movie, so I'm probably forgetting some things that I was thinking of. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the movie a lot more than I thought it was. Was it perfect? No. But nothing is perfect. But yeah, it was really good. But ultimately, I want to hear what you guys think because, this was just my opinion, right? But I want to hear what you guys think because a lot of you have joined me on the ride from season 1 to season 5. And I want to know how it compared, the movie versus the show. And then, how they did certain things in the movie, like power wise or, Hawkmoth, which did you like? Compare the show to the movie. And I just want to hear what you have to say. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. And I'll see you later. Goodbye.